Adding fractions. How do we add two fractions with different denominators? We've got 1/2 add 1/3. Now we have what we call the physical representations of 1/2 and 1/3. Now what we have to do is have a look at these two numbers in the denominators, 2 and 3. We have to think about the lowest common multiple. So what we could do what we call skip counting. So if we count in twos, we go 2, 4, 6 and 8, and we'll stop there. Let's do the same for 3 and 6. We'll stop at 6. The reason being is that 6 is common for both 2 and 6, and therefore it's the lowest common multiple, which is why we can split up a half as 3 lots of 1/6 and 1/3 as 2 lots of 1/6. Now we have to use and we need the same denominators. So to do so, we have to multiply the half, the numerator and the denominator, by 3. Then we also have to multiply 1/3, the numerator and the denominator, by 2. So the denominators are the same. When we evaluate those two fractions, we get 3/6 add 2/6. Now what we have to do is add them. So as you can see below, we have 5 lots of 1/6. And now what we can do is go 3 add 2, so we add the numerators, and therefore we end up with 5/6. And that's our solution. Now you can always check that using your calculator. If you like, I'll bring it up here. Use the fraction button, 3, 6, and we'll go add 2, 6, and we should get 5/6, and we do. Okay, subtracting fractions. So with adding and subtracting fractions, you always need the same denominator. So we have 1/2 subtract 1/3. Again, we have the physical representations of 1/2 and 1/3. We can split them up into 3 lots of 1/6 and 2 lots of 1/6 because 6 is the lowest common multiple for 2 and 3. And we need the same denominators when we're subtracting or adding fractions. So again, we multiply half with the numerator and denominator, multiplying it by 3, and with 1/3 we're multiplying that by 2. We evaluate that, we get 3/6 subtract 2/6. And therefore we get the following. So when we subtract 2/6, we're left with only 1/6. So therefore we subtract the numerators, 3 subtract 2, keep the denominator as it is, and we're left with 1/6. And that's our solution. Now again, if you like, you can use the class pad to check. So we can bring up our fraction, 3/6, subtract 2/6 and equals, and we get 1/6 there. Okay, multiplying fractions. So with multiplying and dividing fractions, it does not use the same concepts as subtracting and adding fractions. You do not need the same denominators. So here we got 1/2 multiplied by 1/3. Our first step is to simplify first. So you always check the multiplication sign. So the diagonals give you a clue about what to simplify. So you simplify the diagonals. In this case, we don't need to. Okay, 2 and 3 are prime numbers, and 1 being the special number. So now we multiply through, and now we have 1 multiplied by 1 for the numerator, then we have the vinculum, and then 2 multiplied by 3. So the vinculum being that line. Now we have 1/2 multiplied by 1/3, and now we have to evaluate. And then afterwards we just simplify again if needed. So that equals 1/6, and that's our solution. So again, we could check that using the calculator. We have two fractions, 1/2 multiplied by, so just make sure you always use the arrow key to move across, especially when using handheld calculator. So 1/2 multiplied by 1/3 equals 1/6. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What is 1/3 of a half? So we've got a physical representation of a half there. And just have a look at how many 6 we're able to fit in there. Very interesting. It might give you a clue about what multiplying fractions really is. Dividing fractions. In this case, we got a half divided by 1/6. Our first step is to flip the numerator and the denominator, and we only do the right side only. So we have a half, and now what we do is we change the division into multiplication. So we have 1/6, and as you can see, we flip the numerator and the denominator. Now step 2, we simplify first. We make sure we check the diagonals. Okay, in this case, in one diagonal we've got 1 and 1. They're both special numbers, so we don't have to simplify further. But next we have 2 and 6. So how many 2's go into 6? We have 3. Okay, and how many 2's go into 2? We have 1. So therefore 6 will change to 3 and 2 will change to 1. So now we got 1/1 multiplied by 3/1, and it equals, now we just multiply through 1 multiplied by 3 over 1 multiplied by 1. Now we evaluate. We have 3/1, so 3 divided by 1 is just 3. And we can simplify again if we need it, but we don't need to in this case. And therefore we've got our solution. So what we could do is check with the calculator again. In this case we had a half. Divided by 1/6. There we go, equals, and we get 3. Now, how many 6 go into 1/2? So again we have 1/2, and we've got 1, 2, and 3. Interesting. Once again, that gives you a bit of a clue about what dividing fractions does.